You're now listening to the Diversity Roundtable. I'm Pamela Klaba, entrepreneur, inclusion enthusiast, and the founder of Nonkosi Creatives with over 2 decades as a corporate HR professional. My goal is to give you insights into conversations with entrepreneurs and corporate professionals who have insightful stories of triumph and leadership. I uncover my personal journey from cultivating diversity and promoting inclusive communities. We'll also find out why building a prosperous society is vital for leadership roles. Subscribe and get ready to rise, lead, and help define the spirit of South African excellence. Welcome. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Pamela Klaba, for the Diversity Roundtable. We are on episode 21, right? How far we have come with this podcast, and every time we are going from strength to strength, and I'm so blessed and I'm so privileged and I'm so honored and I'm so lucky today that I've got the most incredible ladies in studio today. You will hear more about who they are and the nice and the wonderful things that they do in their spaces, both professionally as well as on a personal level. So, but before I introduce our guests today, I'm also still reeling from the previous episode, which was episode 20 that we recorded with Monde from the Black Management Forum. So I think we're continuing with this narrative around the diversity context as far as talent and people are concerned. So I think let's start with our topic first before I introduce our guests. So our topic for today, this one I really have to read it. You know, I always say to people with podcasting, we're not on TV, right? we can say whatever that we want, but also we can be authentic and actually just read certain things just to make sure that they come through and they're not rephrased, not to mean what they are supposed to mean. So today's topic is the power of diverse talent pools, unlocking innovation in South African organizations. You know, so I hope that is very, very clear. So, but then I'll recap on our topic. But for now, let us introduce our guests, our beautiful ladies, fabulous ladies. We've got Lindiwe Ncongwane, who is the head of learning and development. And I also have Marcy Murwa, who is the director for people and talent. So ladies, welcome. Thank you for coming through. Thank you. I'm so privileged and I'm so honored to have you. I know that I've been pestering you for the past weeks now because I don't take no for an answer.
We are here.
No. Yes, and I don't take no for an answer. Yeah. But I think before we get into the discussion, let's start with you, Lindiwe. So just to introduce yourself, who you are. You know, the reason why we started this podcast, let me just give context as well for our listeners and our viewers who may be new to our podcast, is that, it was with the aim of really listening to the journeys, experiences of really successful corporate executives, successful entrepreneurs as well, with the aim of inspiring young professionals, up-and-coming entrepreneurs, specifically from previously disadvantaged communities, so that if they listen to their journeys and your stories and how you also overcame some challenges through your journey, they can also be inspired to say that, look, if Marcy and Pam and Lindiwe can go through that and still make it to the other end, and because life is a journey, right? It's not a destination, you know. So I think it's with that context then that I'm just really so excited, because you are just really some of our trailblazing leaders that we have in our professional communities today. So let me keep quiet because I can go on and on. But Lindiwe, please let me hand over to you before I trip over myself. Please introduce yourself, who you are, your background, your passions, and what you're all about.
Are you sure?
You're welcome. But keep it short now. We don't have the whole day.
That's not fair.
Over to you. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for having me here.
Yes.
All right. So if as you just said, I'm Lindiwe Ncongwane.
Yeah.
And I was just telling Marcy how I am Betty. And she says, that's confusing. No name, surname, nothing says that. Listen, I'm a petty girl. Okay.
Yeah.
It ends there. If you want to know my story, follow me.
Oh my, I wouldn't have thought. I just
No.
assumed that you are closer. But
No,
anyway.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it helps that I'm multilingual because it confuses even worse because I can
Yes.
speak probably with anybody. So,
Yes.
yeah, so that's me, but I'm also a mother of 2 boys. I think I say that a lot. People that know me know about my boys. I put them up
Yes.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And then, besides that, in corporate space, I started first, before HR, I'm first a software developer.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, it would be interesting to hear later on in your journey. Well, how did you get into HR? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then I say a lot that, listen, you must just follow the journey. Nothing
Yes.
goes to waste. So I started there first, and then as I was in the corporate space, I realized, I'm in the HR, team? Hey, corporate structures.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, I need credibility. So I had to start my HR degree over again.
Yeah.
And then that's what now probably I'm majoring mostly in.
Yes.
So that's how I've transitioned. But yeah, that's me.
Yes. So then what drives Lindiwe, right?
I feel I'm a teacher and probably a healer. And in many ways, in my voice, in my presence, in just my being.
Yes.
And I feel that that's what I do, whether I'm aware or not aware of it. So my passion is to always feel or find an opportunity to teach. Either whether I show somebody something, I coach, whether I share information. I'm that one person who just does not have boundaries. Like I talk about anything and everything. I don't want to know whether you are subordinate, whether you are a child, whether if I see a girl and I'm like, you're 12, I'm like, I think we can talk.
Yes.
And I'm not looking at, this is a child, whatever. So I'm very open like that. Because I do feel that people can learn from me, but I also I don't have those boundaries, which I think is a gift. There are a lot of people who feel they need to be private and certain things, but I don't have those things. So I think it's a thing. It's deliberate in that I need to teach in what I say, in how I interact with people, and in that they also find that healing. To say, okay, I felt so insecure. I felt like something is wrong, but things I'm okay, so I do that. I do have my own YouTube channel as well. So On Hold with Lindiwe Ncongwane, and I think On Hold for me it was like there's a lot of things in our heads. Like I call them squirrels. I call them squirrels. Like there are some people who can't even manage their own squirrels. It's like one thought is like talking about this. Okay, now this, that. And for me, it was like, can you just, when you're put on hold on a call, like you have to listen to music. Now you're forced to slow down. Even when you're so anxiously waiting for the other person to answer, but you're forced to hold and slow down. And either listen to the music or whatever. So in that case, I'm thinking about it like, listen to the thought. Don't let it just run past you. And it's running again next week and it's running out again next week. What is that thought saying? Can you just sit with it? Can we talk about it? Can you look at it? And those are the things that I talk about as well. So it's mostly social issues, the daily issues, how we relate with one another. Why do we make each other suffer so much when we are people with ourselves? I mean, we torture ourselves. So I start with that. What are the ways that we torture ourselves? I speak to that, parenting, being a child myself, being so different dynamics in terms of how relationships happen, and those things that we need to really talk about. So and I take the stories from the people. I listen, Musne. And people, when they see me, they see conversations anyway. So I listen, okay, but why? And I listen to how people battle with it. But it takes time because I also have to internalize it. Some of it triggers me personally. And I realize, I think maybe I'm also there or not there yet or something. But I have to think about, okay, what is the real issue? And then I probably then will have a solo conversation, or sometimes I have people who want to join in and share, and then I listen to them and say, okay, now I understand what you're trying to teach us as well. So That's my passion. Youth is my passion. I love young people. I just feel that there's a lot to give. I don't know. They just make my heart like just pump faster.
Yes.
Yeah. So I like that. So yeah, that's my passion, I think.
So it makes you much more relatable, right? So I think, and I also picked it up the first time actually that I had a discussion with you, because I was actually trying to sell you business. And then it just, turned into something else, and then we just started talking about other things, right? So that energy certainly, you have it, and I can testify that certainly you are a nurturer. As soon as someone starts talking to you, it's like, as we're driving here today, I just poured out my heart about
and I heard it all.
What's going on with me? But anyway, let's focus. Let's focus. Marcy, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So
Thank you. Also one of those people where, I started talking to and we just went off, on other things. But please tell us who you are. Tell our viewers and our listeners who you are, your background, your experience, whatever that you're willing to share in your personal space, what drives you, what motivates you, what are your passions? So over to you.
No, thank you. And thank you for the invitation. Having listened to some of your previous recordings, one has learned quite a lot. And so it's such an honor to be sharing a seat with Lindiwe, first of all, but also your previous guests that have, sat in the same seat that we're sitting on. And so great work that you're doing. There's a lot of learnings that happens. But my name is Mosebjadi Marcy Murwa. So I think, different to Lindiwe, when I say Mosebjadi, people already,
you know what? Can I just make you pause there? Because I've got your full name. But I was like,
you didn't
trying to
practice
avoid the risk of mispronouncing. So I stuck to Marcy because that's safe. So because I was going to ask you, how do you pronounce the full name? But I'm glad that you said it.
It will be easier for Lindiwe. But Mosebjadi, and the whole story around names and people's names and whatever. But very comfortable with Marcy as well. And, we'll have another discussion around how the name Marcy came into being. But, I come from Polokwane. I am a sister, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter. I think, life, grew up, the traditional ways that we grow up. A rural girl from Hampatlele. And I'm actually so proud that I can say that on a podcast. It's what those things.
Yes.
Oh, no, rural girl, home girl. And then the typical, child of two academics. That when 1994 came and they were able to now move into the suburbs, of Flora Park in Polokwane, we moved into those suburbs. And just really then started the journey of going and attending what was then termed as the multiracial school, right? Attended and finished my high schooling in Polokwane, and then, 2019 it was a proper Jane comes to Joburg, the big light city, and I was like, what is this and what is this all about? With the idea of wanting to study accounting and become an accountant. Then the last year I had to do taxation and statistics, and I said, there's no way, Mom, let me take a gap year. And I was in a session and they were talking about a work and travel program to the United States for about 18 months. I said, can I just do that? I'll come back and I'll focus on taxation and statistics. But I just need a break because just, those two words, I was like, no, I don't know about that. I don't know if this is me, right? And I remember my older sister thinking, just finish and then you'll go. And I was, quite insistent that I do the work and travel. And so I did the work and travel for 18 months. And then came back and started working in a call center. It was at a time where call centers were thriving. You're finding these international companies coming into South Africa to set up call centers. And because I had spent time in the States, there was a company that was setting up a call center here. And so then I started there. And I did call center work for, about 6 months before I was then appointed as an HR administrator. And that's where my journey in the people space really started. And it just connected. It just fit. In terms of who I am as a person, in terms of my profile, in terms of working the profile in the people space, I could not see myself doing anything else. And so it was typical HR admin type of work, and then moving into HR officers, and moving into recruitment and all of that. But I think for me, where the topic around transformation really hit was when I was working for one of the companies, and it must have been about 15 years ago. And we had a diversity training. At the time, it was just diversity training. And so transformation was coming into the space. And we sat in the training, and this was facilitated by Ubabu Stanley Bongwe, who wrote the book 100 Lessons in Diversity. I think you might know him. And I just remember, after that, it was a whole day session, and I just remember how fulfilled I felt coming out of the session. And that's where really my journey and my research and involvement in the diversity space and transformation really started. As I indicated, on a personal level, I think, a lot of people might connect with the story, but, I'm a mother of two biological kids and one chosen baby in Cape Town. So you must look out for her when you are there. And a 14 and a 13-year-old, and just going through the teenage years with those two. On the family side, and it's unfortunate as a South African that we've all experienced some sort of crime that is related. I lost my father in 1994, and he was murdered. And 10 years later, I lost my mother. And so my older sister then had to become the parent, right? And then when I turned 30, I lost my husband as well. So I became a young widow at the time. But often I've been, when people say, tell us about yourself, it used to be stories that I would omit and not necessarily share. But it's stories that are such a huge part of who I am and where I am today and my perception towards life and my work in the people space are hugely influenced by a lot of the background that I've gone in. But also I think it tied in very well to the whole concept of storytelling, right? Because in this space that we work in, it's so important that we are able to, put ourselves out there around the stories that we've experienced. And so my passion is that work that we do of setting the scene for others who might just be looking and say, well, that just seems like a perfect picture. There's a long story behind that perfect picture.
Sure. Oh my, such richness, ladies, honestly, and you are so absolutely right that the power of storytelling, because you just really never know who people are until you sit them down and they actually tell you, who they are, where they've been, what challenges they've had to overcome, and some of the things that really keep them going, right? And it's, I love, when I talk to people, I always have this thing that when you talk, you need to listen to someone's soul. And, so, because that's, that's for me, that's how I find a point of connection, right? Because also there are people that you talk to and you feel like, oh, this is such a dry conversation. And you even struggle to come up with the next sentence, right? By just listening to your stories and the introductions and whatnot, thank you for being here.
We need
to
us
both
back.
of you.
I'm sure you just thought that's a topic. That one, let's talk about that.
Yes.
Episode 23.
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much to our viewers and listeners. You know what? I always say that I need to brag because we just keep getting better and better, just the quality of the guests that we continue to have. So thank you so much, ladies, for coming through. Let's come back to our topic, right? Which is the power of diverse talent pools. So I think let's continue with you. I'll come back to Lindiwe. So that you can build on that. So in your role, right, you are people and talent director in HR spaces. You've seen all sorts, right, in this space. So when you think about this topic, so how would you really then define it in the South African context, right? Given where we come from as a people and where we are, and also if you have to compare it to your traditional, recruitment practices that we've seen organizations employ in the past. But there's just so much diversity now. And when you like in your role, and you come across a topic that says the power of diverse talent pools in today's world in 2024, what does this mean for you, just looking at the professional landscape and society in general?
I think, a diverse talent pool is, I think, first of all, one that will reflect the socio-cultural landscape of South Africa. That takes into consideration our demographics, that takes into consideration our, unique transformation objectives. And then tries and create a pool in consideration of those. When we look at diversity, I think it's quite stretched. It's no longer about just trying to reach an equity talent, right? It's broader than that. It's the representation and the involvement and the inclusion of people from a different racial and ethnic diverse background. It talks about the disability inclusion when we talk about a diverse talent pool. It talks about the background and the socioeconomic diversity that exists there, obviously coupling in gender diversity into it. And I think it's quite wide. Now we're talking about neurodiversity into these spaces when we talk about talent pools, right? And for us, it differs hugely from the traditional homogenic recruitment practices that have been practiced. I mean, it's quite clear that when you practice those traditional standards, is that you're stifling quite a lot of things. You're stifling issues around, different perspectives, different ways of looking at things. When you're looking at those recruitment practices, the only thing that is going to thrive there, really, in essence, is your biases, right? It's the stereotypes that still remain. And it's a smaller talent pool that you then create because of the homogeneous practices, recruitment practices that one would be looking at. But also you would be recruiting people that look like each other, that think like each other, that looks at resolving problems in a similar way, that really have a limited understanding of your customer base, because your customer base in itself in the South African context is quite diverse, right? And so when you bring in a diverse talent pool, it's one that extends outside of your organization into the communities, but also into your customer base as well.
Yes. No, perfectly put, because I think I like the fact that you're connecting this to the social context, because, looking at the type of communities where people come from, right? So it's also important and also to recognize that people cannot leave who they are at the door when they enter the workplace, right? Because people face the real issues, mainly, from underrepresented groups and underrepresented marginalized communities. So it's very important then that when we see people in the workplace and we actually have the context of the communities that they represent, So I think it's very important. You're raising a very valid point. So I think, Lindiwe, we need to build on that, right? We need to build on that. So it's all good and well to say that, look, we've got underrepresented individuals or people that make it to the talent pools and they are, enter the workplace. But how do we make sure that they thrive and that they are supported, when they enter the workplace? Because there's a lot going on, right? In our workspaces. There's a lot, right? So you mentioned this thing about young people and how much you love young people. And how do we make sure then that, especially when they come from underrepresented groups and communities?
And that's the tough one, because we see it from the institutions of higher learning. Before even you get to the organization, right? Because now you have a child who's from Venda. And what's the Squinbilwi is one of the schools I think that's always thriving. The minister's definitely going to award 1 or 2 or 3 of those students from their each year in matric, you understand? So those marks aren't jokes, right?
Yes.
But if you look at the context of where they come from, the cultural way of their being. Child gets accepted at a UCT or a Stellenbosch or a Wits or anything. Now, already there's a barrier in terms of whether it's social or whichever, because they don't understand what's going on here. Why are people not raising their hands? Why are people talking back to the lecturer? Why are people, what's the social thing here? We don't wear this. And then there's all of that. And then there's that context that they don't get. Then come first half of the year, their marks look different. Because the standard is like shot up. And then they cry. You see, because they're not used to this. Now it looks as if they're not performing, their confidence is now. So it starts there where they're always going to be, it's going to take a long time to actually get them to get back their confidence, to understand it's a different context. Some take it well, some don't take it very well. And then, so we've got that challenge, because if you work with bursary students, we work with all of those, and you can see the challenge that is there in terms of there's a social context as well that is coming to play. Now this person moves now, becomes a graduate intern, and needs to now come into your business, right? And I think the biggest issue is carry the people inside. Like to Marcy's point, the biases and everything, because as much as you want to break the barriers and actually open the diversity of thought, you've got people holding on to what they also know and who are not willing also to be adaptive. They love the idea of having diverse, but they don't have the skill to manage the diversity. So instead, they rather not. So you become a bit, that's where you sometimes find bullying, autocratic like leadership and all of that, because it's kind of like, this is how things are done. Okay, so now, my thing is, if we look at schooling from actually even when we are younger, even the most talented, different children, we can't. You talk about neurodiverse, you talk about whether boxed. Our education system boxes you. You must be able to sit on a chair. My son went through that where he's like, he learns by doing. You can't come stand up and go touch the teacher's what. Do you understand? You must sit down.
Yes.
And listen. And then he's like, okay, can I go to the toilet then? Okay, so you get from there boxing. You get to tertiary again, trim, box. This is the structure. Get to work, you box. So we lose the talent and the rawness of that person. And then also when they meet the leadership who's also not going to say, I think you are different, but you've just been hiding. Let me allow you to show me, or show even yourself, what you really are about. Right? So there's that, and that's the work that we have to do in removing the fear. I think it's fear mostly of the leaders of just, this is how I know it. This is how I've succeeded. I've got a track record. That's why I'm a director. That's why I'm in this, because I've done things this way. Now showing them a different way of doing things is hard, because change is just hard. So I think that's the work that we constantly have to do, which takes a journey. But and sometimes we get tired and just like,
I'm just listening and I'm thinking that society teaches us to conform. On so many things, on the social front, on the professional front,
everywhere.
And is that, this is how you that's why you even get phrases like, you need to do things by the book.
Yes.
What book?
Which book? Who wrote?
Nobody shares, right?
Book?
Nobody shares the book.
Very.
You need to toe the line. At some point in my career, I was told to toe the line. I'm still wondering what line was I supposed to toe. But anyway, let's not,
the invisible line.
Because that has because the other time I was in class, I'm studying for my sins. And we were doing future studies and thinking, and you know how we struggle, like physically, when you realize I'm expected to think about 30 years from now. And we keep on thinking, but you think with the context of today, and you're like, why am I so scared? You know?
Yeah.
And why am I so scared to like let go of my brain and let it just
Yes.
go?
Yes.
You can like, no, but there's no way because there's still. But then I have to remind myself, you're still in today, girl. Oh, okay, I might let go of the today.
Yes.
And I thought, what stopped us from being so curious?
Yes.
And that's exactly what you're saying. You know, we grow up like children don't ask parents questions. Ne? If I say you sleep, you don't ask me, why am I sleeping at 9 o'clock?
Yeah.
That's us. Our children now will ask you the question. What is the difference with me sleeping at 8:30 to 9? You know, then you are stuck. Just do the thing. Most of our cultural ways are also not explained.
Yes, they're not.
They're
right?
not explained. Say, Mama, why can't we cut our hair at night?
Yes.
Hey,
You don't cut your hair.
just don't do it. It's been like this.
Yeah.
So we stopped.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's very important because then I think it brings me to the next, prompt for Marcy. And you are right, Lindiwe, that conformity stifles growth. It stifles innovation so much, right? And which then leads me to the next point for you, Marcy, that really says, what is then the role of leadership really now? And when it comes to diversity and inclusion strategies, So because it's a term that's been thrown out there loosely. It's so popular now. Everyone just says diversity and inclusion, and I'm like, okay.
Now it even gets added. It's the EEI, it's the DIE, and there's a belonging aspect.
You know what I
mean?
And so what is the leadership role in these strategies, and especially also at grassroots levels, and to just really just break it down, because it almost sounds as if it's something that is just far-fetched, but also not for young people, not articulated very well. Because someone who says diversity inclusion, the first go-to point, they think race and gender, right?
Yeah, of course.
But then can you just break it down for us, especially, what you've seen in your spaces, where the role of leadership is important in terms of coming up with really robust diversity and inclusion strategies?
I think very, very good question. And maybe allow me to start with, what is the role of leaders when it comes to diversity and inclusion, but more so around the diverse talent pools that we talk about. It's a crucial one. It goes without saying. I think the tone has to be set at the very top. And when I say the very top, we sometimes think of your executive management team. But even at board level, diversity has to be mandated at board level. It really has to start at the top, because when it starts at the top, it sets the standard and it sets the tone for everyone in the business around how we've prioritized diversity and inclusion. These are the acceptable measures that we are going to be working on. And this is how we understand diversity to be able to give us that competitive advantage as a business. There's a business case that we all know about, and I think people talk a lot around, if you have a diverse talent, what is the business? How does it contribute to my bottom line? And we've spoken about, a better understanding of your customers, your diverse customers, because your customers are also diverse, right? So there's a business case, but I prefer to stick to the moral case when it comes to diversity and inclusion. That really, for me, where I've seen diversity really being done well, has been done well by conscious leaders. They have a way of being able to introduce and prioritize the initiatives that come around D&I into the business, and really they've come to understand that competitive advantage that diversity gives them. So first, it has to be a priority in business around wanting to do that. But more than that, South Africa, we've got 12 official languages, we've got races, we've got the LGBTIQ community, we've got people living with a disability. We have such a diverse and complex maybe landscape, socio-cultural landscape. And I think instead of it working against us, it can work for us. And so how do we celebrate that? How do we strengthen ourselves based on that? And how do we understand how it advantages us in having an understanding what it can bring to our business? I often say, when you're a business that is operating in South Africa, you must look like a business that is operating in South Africa. And what that means is that you're going to have people from even different geographic areas, as you've indicated, right? Back in the day, when you followed these traditional recruitment practices, it was their accent. How do they speak? Okay, they're not a fit. And this whole concept, and I recently heard this, and I thought that's what makes sense, because the idea is that when we promote diversity, inclusion, and belonging, we should be looking at culture as not so much culture fits. Because culture fits is you must look like the existing employee profile in the organization.
Sure,
that is our
you've
culture
hit it
fit.
right on the nail, right?
Where culture add is you're bringing in something different. You're bringing a different perspective around that. So I know it was long-winded, but I hope that gave an idea.
No, it does. It does, because I think it also then leads into then, the element of training, learning and development that, to say, because you are right, we've seen and we work in spaces where organizations like, this is our culture. And so it's like, okay, define the culture for even when you go for interviews, where you get these culture fit questions that you're supposed to, you're supposed to answer, but times have changed so much, but then I think, in your space, then Lindiwe, in the learning and development context, right? So how do we continue then to elevate the topics and the learnings and around unconscious bias, around also coupled with cultural awareness, to Marcy's point, that, we don't say terms like culture fit and culture add, because it's got to do with what's ingrained in our minds and how we grew up and what we were taught, and a lot of it is unconscious. There is a conscious element that is blatantly conscious, and we know these things, but how do we then deal with the elements of unconscious bias and cultural awareness in the learning and development spaces to help organizations in this journey?
There's a lot of things we can do, but we always default to training, right?
Yeah.
So let's say we default to training, and we go to our famous model of using the 70-20-10. So 10% must be formal training and job, and 20% and work experience being the most, right? Let's use that model, which means training and putting people in courses is only gonna just give you
10%.
that much. You can do it. It's fine for knowledge and understanding theory, all of that. But the trick is there, getting that live experience. So your role, Marcy, is to bring in those people so that we can be uncomfortable. There's no way, like I said with my slides, it's like you need to do it to be able to. So for me, learning and development is all only about programs, courses. People learn by being in an experience or being in a space, and then they have to battle with whatever is inside of them, outside of them, in order to find themselves and to learn and to change their mindset, but also change the way they look at things. You understand? So that's my biggest way of advocating for this. It's like, put me in that space. So bring the people. And it's about talking to line managers and challenging that to say, what are you mostly worried about if this person joins your team? Okay, so is that a bad thing? Maybe let's say it's your developmental item or something like that, because if we really do want to be technical about training and we go there, it means the only way we're going to learn this is by experience. So opening the door. So first changing the mindset, all right, I know I'm not there. I don't know everything and I'm uncomfortable. So that psychological safety must come in. That vulnerability, exposing your insecurities, and trying to say, listen, I don't know if I can lead young people. They look to me like they're so flimsy and whatever and demanding, but I will try. Do I have somebody that I can lean on to say, then what do I do now? Possibly, can I ask for that? So that's mostly, how we should do it, because we cannot always be imagining it. If you go to a class and a course, you're just going to listen to it and imagine it and hope that, it feels and looks and whatever great. Until you are in the fire, we were preparing for the script, but when you sit here, it's different.
It's different,
So let's use that 70% more.
Yeah. No,
and just to briefly add, I mean, even when it comes to this space, it's like we hold the sentiments. And sentiments are great, but let's put it into action, which is better. When it's put into action, challenge yourself to bring the awareness into your spaces, and really try and understand where the benefit in this diverse talent pool really comes from. Because I do agree with you, classroom training comes to an end at a certain point.
Sentiment wears off after dinner.
Action.
Or lunch. If your session was in the morning. As soon as you're full, we've forgotten about the sentiment.
Else,
But then a lot of it has to do with psychological safety, right?
100%.
And so I think just build on that, just connect that with psychological, and just make it really practical, right? And give us maybe some scenarios to say, what are practical examples? Because then if you're going to ask me as a leader, what makes me, what I think is going to happen, or what scares me if this type of profile of a personality joins my team and whatnot. And how do I even get to a point where I say, actually, I'm afraid of 1, 2, 3, because people don't want to say that. And it has a lot to do with psychological safety, and how do we make sure that it's a safe space for people, because also a lot of it, people hold back because of fear of being judged, or fear of, and this and this and this, I'm going to come across or come out or look like I'm not politically correct, those type of things. So when you say people learn by doing and experience and whatnot, so just give us some practical example, because we've received training galore, right, on diversity, but then, how is it really, what's changed? Has it really shifted the needle? What are some of the practical examples just to build on that?
Okay, can I make a comment before I even give you the example? So as you were saying, I mean, I think the issue of psychological safety is a leader's everyday situation. It's like it's not even about diversity.
Yes.
It's like I'm new, I get in, I'm new. For example, I leave here, I go to a different city. So I leave Gauteng, go to the Western Cape and get there. I get a team that's been there for years. First thing, I'm already feeling like I need to prove myself. Okay, now I need to work hard. I need to show that I'm worth the buck. Why were you hired when we were here the whole time? You understand? So that already doesn't allow me to drop my guts and say, guys, I don't know your industry. Can you just let me in and teach me? You understand? As part of an example, to say, can you just allow me in and then show me why is this? How? So a lot of managers don't. We want to maintain, you know, and then we make mistakes. And Shem, your team can see you. This one.
See right through you, right?
And they hired this one. So I think that's one, to feel that you need to exercise it. So if you are going to, so some of the examples are possibly, if you're looking at some industries don't really are very rigid when it comes to people with disability. Okay, understandably so, for whatever reasons they are, but they've got it ingrained in them that this can never work. and then forgetting that we've moved past and the definition of disability is wider and the list is longer and everything. And it's like, why do you always think when I'm saying I'm bringing a person on disability and you're thinking a wheelchair? And you kind of like have to challenge that to say, no, I can.
That's how we've been conditioned.
Yeah, right? That's what you see first in your brain. You say, disability, wheelchairs, you can't have people agree you can't go to this zone and this zone, and you can't have people have to go up and drive these cars. We can't. And that's what you think about. And you forget to remember that actually there's a longer list. The definition is bigger. So you can really, and there's technology that has advanced so much of the disabilities that you actually can, but we don't give the opportunity to actually think and say, can you just pause, what do you see? When I say disability, what's the picture? So that I can understand your frame of reference to say, what are you thinking from? You know?
So I guess that tells me then that the more and more we have this type of authentic conversations in our spaces, that will actually help people to open up about, you know, how they see the world of diversity and inclusion versus to say, come and attend this training program. Because already that says, okay, I'm going to teach you. But you don't know, let me teach you, instead of saying, because like I said, when we started earlier, is that people in our workspaces, they come from communities, different communities. So this is not taboo. It's stuff that we see in our communities, whatever community that you come from, right? And you interact with human beings on the daily, at the malls, on weekends, and. So what makes the workplace different? What makes it different, right? But then, again, coming back to talent, right, Marcy, because then I'm just going to shift gears and talk about, we're talking about diverse talent pools, right? And enabling innovation, right? So talk to us about the notion of mentorship and sponsorship. Because I think that's also an important part of, how does that play out, on the journey of supporting diverse talent pools.
And I love it. I mean, I was watching a video, and it was on LinkedIn. And this lady was talking about, I just can't remember her name, but it did the rounds on LinkedIn for a while. And she was talking about mentorship. And what mentorship is and what sponsorship is. And what excites me is that these two are now being made into one. Because we're sitting in an environment, sometimes even with this diverse talent team, that is over-mentored, but under-sponsored. Because we've got mentors coming left, right, and center. Everybody feels, hey, it's like a mentor.
They'll mentor you until you're a granny.
But sponsorship is different. Sponsorship is when somebody mentions your name in rooms that you have not even walked into. Now that's sponsorship. Now that's taking mentorship a step further to say, because the way I define it is, my mentor is going to speak on my behalf in rooms that I don't get to sit in conversations that is something. I'm a product of mentorship and sponsorship throughout my entire career. Somebody said something on my behalf, and chances are that somebody was different to me in terms of race, different to me in terms of gender, different to me in terms of the way their voice was heard as compared to how my voice was heard. And they use their voice for that purpose. And so having said that, you can see the critical part that mentorship and sponsorship would play in really enabling the diverse talent pool, right? But it also then talks about, the retention of the diverse talent crowd around what sort of spaces is this diverse group sitting in. Because a lot of the organizations will say, we want diverse talent, but we can't keep them. You see, retaining diverse talent is just as difficult as recruiting for the diverse talent. And so when you bring in the mentorship and the sponsorship, because that will enable an inclusion workspace where you are not put there as somebody I know used to say screensaver. I cannot screensaver, but you know, I can edit anything else. You screensaver.
Yeah.
And I think so. It for me is, you know, mentorship and sponsorship definitely play an important role in terms of, you know, supporting a diverse talent pool within organizations.
Sure.
You know what? I'm thinking. Something also I was reading about organization. So normally organizations believe that they are very accommodating and very diverse, whereas the talent you're trying to keep is not feeling that.
Yeah.
And because the perception is always one-sided, and even in the strategies that we come up with in terms of what we feel needs to be done to create this diverse space. Guess who's in the committees, in the deciding? The leaders.
Yeah.
When you ask the people themselves whether they feel included or they feel that they're being, you know, they feel that they're comfortable, it's different. So that's why it's hard to, and they go away. They're like, no, you're not hearing me. I'm like, oh, but I've done this and this. Surely this should be, you know, diverse. I have the toilets, I have the whatever. You see, so we should be fine. I've restructured my packages. They are flexible. Is that what I needed? To feel like I belong, to feel included. Did you ask me? I don't mind the toilet. It's okay. So we don't speak to them to say, we recognize you are all diverse as a talent. What would make you stay?
Yes. But I think also the representation then of your diverse talent, right? Because if I walk into an organization where, as a perhaps youngster, you know, I'm 43 now, so you know, on that generational cusp, right? If I walk into as a youngster coming into the workspace, and when I look at your organization and I see the lack of representation, there's a conversation I'm having in my head to say, no. There's a different standard here that is taken into understanding the talent pool, not a diverse talent pool, but the talent pool. And immediately then I will make a decision around how much effort I'm going to bring into the organization. And also at that time I've made a decision around how long I'm going to stay. And at what point I'm going to exit.
In your first 3 months, you know.
In your first 3 months, you know.
First week.
You know, and you're going, because here's the thing, when I don't see anybody that looks like me, that, you know, has a hair like mine, that is of a similar gender to mine, then it tells me a lot around where D&I is prioritized when it comes to building the talent pools as well. And it's the unintentional communication and the messaging that business sends to people. And as a business, I think you want to make sure that whatever message you send out is intentional, so that you can avoid the unintentional consequences, so to speak.
But then, just to add on what you are saying, ladies, and also, you know, but don't you also think that it has to do with the maturity of that organization and where they are in their journey? And it's a very intentional question that statement that I'm making. That so you go in and you don't see people that look or sound like you at certain levels, or even the higher you go, right, leadership levels and whatnot. And maybe, you know, if you have to flip this around and say, okay, fine, I don't see, maybe I'm not going to stay very long. So what if then you are the person who is brought in to be the change and actually bring in more people that look like you? That's another way of looking at it.
100%.
But often we sometimes don't, you think, oh, why am I the only one? Oh no, you know, there must be something wrong. Or it could be that the organization is realizing that, you know, we need to do something here. But because this thing is not a revolution, it's an evolution. So we need to start with Marcy. But then so that Marcy can say, Marcy, your role actually is to help us.
Yes. Tell us.
Yes, it must be, you know.
That you are the catalyst.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
that's okay, right?
Yes,
Isn't that an okay conversation to have?
It is.
Around this is where, and in fact, I'll tell you this, I've had those conversations to say, we have no idea what we are doing here. We don't even want to start because we are so scared that we're going to get it wrong and there will be reputational damages. And so we've just not done anything. But because Lindiwe, you are here, help us guide in terms of how do we position ourselves. We do see it as an important attribute to add to our business. But we don't necessarily have the know-how to be able to do it. And when you have an honest conversation, I mean, I speak for myself, you know, I would rather you have that honest conversation than, you know, me think, you know, just as when there's a certain client that comes to the business, I get invited to the session. But when, you know, but when there's other clients, I don't get invited to the sessions. I wonder why that is, you know. You know, certain things like that can be.
I agree.
Because I think we need to take away the fear. The fear element needs to go from our leaders. And while we're creating these psychological safe spaces, it's just as equally important that these psychological safe spaces are not only created for the select few because of the level of diversity, if I can put it that way, but that it's wider, that we create the level of awareness to say, you are in a safe space. If you know, come talk to me if you want to check in something. And sometimes you know, you have that person that comes into your office and say, listen, I don't know if this is the right way I should be looking at this, but this is what, because then you've created those safe spaces to have those safe conversations. And that's where you can teach. That's the 70% that Lindiwe was talking about. The on the job, the practical learnings. This is how the experience, and that's where impact for me. And I think you hold the same view. That's where impact is, really.
Yeah, you must tell. The thing is, you can't say, we see you. You don't tell me. I have to accept the challenge too. And I have to know that because this is it, it's going to be difficult for me personally. And then what do I do? Do I have that sponsor, that mentor that I need to go to and say, listen, it's tough. I didn't realize you called me to this toughness. You understand? So I'm struggling also. And what are you going to do about it? Not that you appoint and then I can see this now and then we are hoping you are the talk to me.
Say that I can say we're at this point because
and I can also say, you know what, even this new diversity of mine, or whatever condition of mine is new to me. I don't think I'm strong to take in whatever. You understand? Because you must remember, it doesn't matter whether you just came out of the closet, if people say that, or say whatever, or you were never born with a disability. Now you have a disability. You are still navigating your life through it. And now you want to make me the example, right? Are you sure that I'm mentally, physically, psychologically ready to navigate your environment and do this catalyst work that you want me to do? Speak to me. Tell me how you're going to support me, protect me. Then I can opt in as well and say, okay. And when it gets tough, I don't leave. I don't do that.
Because you have a sponsor.
Yes, I know in 6 months I'm gone. You don't do that. You know that I signed up for the challenge.
That's true. No, thank you so much, ladies, because I think that lack of openness and communication and the intentions are well stated up front. This is what happens, and people then, you know, the people have got a lot of emotional scars and, you know, of hurt because these certain things were just assumed, you know. So, and I think it's very important, especially now with the younger generations. These ones, they don't play, you know, they just tell you that, look, this thing is not going to work because, you know, so it's very important. But then before we close, you know, actually we've been talking for what 50 minutes, 1 hour?
Oh, really?
Oh, my. You see, I told you, ladies, that you won't even notice.
You did.
You won't even notice that, you know, but, you know, before we close.
1 hour? What are we going to be talking about for 1 hour? Look at that.
So you see, there you have it, right? But then what advice would you have, like both of you? So, I mean, maybe Lindiwe, you can go first, or Marcy. So what advice would you have for organizations that are in the early stages of developing a strategy that unlocks the power of diverse talent? Right, so there's an organization, they're like, okay, we're not looking okay, and we know that this thing is a journey, but because we're not looking okay, we can't just now fire certain people and bring in certain people in 6 months. It's not done like that. It's unconstitutional even. But, you know, what advice would you have for those type of organizations that are just like, okay, look, we have a serious problem here, and then where do we start? What do we do? So to avoid tokenism, right?
There we go.
Let's go. Yeah.
I think firstly is to determine, firstly, diversity is big, it's broad, right? Remember, in our South African context, we always look for race, gender, the obvious things, right?
Yes.
So as an organization, find your space.
Yeah.
Where really do you want to start?
Yeah.
Is it in the neurodiverse space? I know some of the IT organizations are now doing that. It's not really about race, gender. They're like, literally, I want my CIO to be somebody who is in the spectrum or neurodivergent in this way. I don't want teams that do this because I want them, because they know the amount of detail. So they're very deliberate, right? So those are the type of organizations that have made their minds and picked to say, this is where, for my organization, if I can look at this type of diversity, I think then I can make it as because organizations are there to exist longer, right? So go for what you believe will work for you, and pick what you need to do. Don't try and do everything all at once, and do that. And in that, involve a lot of people, because those biases about you sitting with the same type of people, also trying to plan about diverse people, it's not going to work. It's going to end up just being you again, or less diverse, right? So involve a lot of people. If you don't have a lot of people in your network, in the organization, then call out other people, your peers in other organizations or something, to come and challenge your thinking, right, in terms of what you want to do. So for me, it's like, pick where you want to start, be very clear about it, so that you are able to say, listen, I struggle with females or gender, so that's what I want to do. Your strategy, there's different maturity levels to this. So you will make sure as you go.
Yes. No, absolutely. Thank you, Lindy. What's your take, Marcy? Because also, I think I'd like to put a spin on it, right? Because so that we don't run the risk of saying what Lindiwe has said, is that, you might have an organization that is diverse, right? At all levels, and how you look at it and whatnot, but they've got an inclusion issue, right? So, because, most organizations, when they report and they'll say, oh, we've got, X number of people in this and this and whatever, and really even at higher levels, they have no issue with diversity. None whatsoever. But then maybe their issue is with inclusion.
Screensaver.
The screensaver vibes. Why? Diversity higher. And I think that's why it takes the conversation. I mean, there is a popular saying in diversity and inclusion, which is, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being invited to dance, right?
Yes.
And I think those are the common issues, is that diversity we've got. It is there. We can see it. We're making progress. We can see the progress that women in South Africa are making. Just as one example. When it comes to representation in these businesses. And you're right, the issue still remains that of inclusion, and what exactly does inclusion become? And this is where, for me, it starts with, what is it that we have required of our leaders in the businesses when it comes to inclusion, and how inclusion is measured even. Because we can be fair and say, it's difficult to measure inclusion. In fact, it's not. Because at some point you have to make it intentional, and you have to make it a requirement. And for me, how you advise businesses around inclusion and practicing inclusion is the speak up culture. Is really making sure that you have a speak up culture. And I'm going to give you a classic example, maybe two classic examples. If as a leader, I'm sitting in a meeting where I think there's somebody who should be sitting at this table and they're not at this table, I should not continue with that meeting until that person is in that meeting. When we are meeting in a session and somebody is over talking or speaking over other people, perhaps from the minority, I should be able to say, hold on, I want to hear what Pamela has to say about this matter. She had not finished. And so being able to speak out around these certain measures instead of, she wasn't in the meeting. I did wonder why, because, this is her area of responsibility. But we carried on with the meeting because it was so important. No, it has to be intentional and deliberate in such a way, because I can tell you this, that will be the last time when it's brought up to ask, why is this person not in the meeting? Chances are, the next meetings, they will never be left out, because nobody wants to be asked, why is this person not in the meeting where she's responsible for this area as well. And I think, those are some of the conscious things that you can, start to require of people within the organization, and asking the questions. As leaders of influence, we should want to know why certain things are happening in a certain way. And when a decision has been made, we want to know who was involved in the decision-making process. But also, I think, looking at our committees and the panels that we hold, these support, I think they're called, popular name is ERGs and employee resource groups, so that you create spaces where people can come and say, listen, it's difficult for me in this area. How do I deal with it? Because then it's the support function almost. It's a support group, if I can put it that way. Whether it's the LGBTI group, whether it's the women's forums groups, all those other elements that you can use which will help to continue to promote inclusion within the business.
Okay. So I promise, before we close, we are closing now, but we are closing now. As I'm listening to both of you, respond, and I'm thinking, how do we even contextualize the imposter syndrome?
Ooh.
And I know it's a whole different topic, but just touch on it maybe like 1 minute each, and because I think we've been in spaces. Well, let me speak for myself. So maybe I've been in spaces where, especially, and it hits you no matter your level of confidence. You could be the most confident, and then it just hits you, especially when you least expect it. And so how do we, address the imposter syndrome and inclusion? Or the lack of inclusion, or whatever it is. So maybe make it practical. What has it done for you?
Go first.
Have you experienced it?
Yes.
And how did you deal? How did you overcome?
Probably 2 hours and 24 hours.
A day, that's how bad it is. Like I can't breathe.
The 24 hours, you're like feeling like, am I supposed to be here?
And then the worst thing is, for me, it was that time where at the end of the day, the kids are in bed, and you're going to bed and you're just preparing for bed. So that minute before Orobala, and you were in meetings and you're going, that's just, you shouldn't have said that. Why did you say it like that? Why did you? Everybody must be thinking,
this one.
Because imposter syndrome is the fact that you think you're I guess said simply, you're a crime, and
or you're a fraud, or whatever. They'll catch you out,
and they're gonna catch you out any minute now. They're gonna go, Pam is not what we thought Pam was, right? So I've similar to you, I've experienced imposter syndrome, and how I'll give you how I've dealt with it is by talking to even senior leaders within my space to say I'm battling imposter syndrome. And just being open and vulnerable around that conversation really helped me. Because I was lucky enough to have leaders that I work with who are going, what? What are you talking about?
Yes.
And I don't know if it was the affirmation that worked, because imposter syndrome is the story I'm telling myself, right? And so I then decided, what stories am I going to tell myself? And the story was that I decided to tell myself, it was, you're going to mess up. you're not going to always get it wrong. But goodness, you're going to mess up trying hard every single day.
Yeah.
Because imposter syndrome, for me, people that have imposter syndrome is overachievers. It's overachievers. Certain perfectionists in some way that are so hard on yourself. Yeah. And for me, I think my healing part was, as long as you are doing the best that you know and you're capable of, and be okay that, some things you're not going to get right, because how perfect? Nobody is. Right?
Yeah.
But it's such a real thing, and I definitely can identify.
Yes.
It sent me to therapy. And it sent me to a tattoo parlor.
This page.
Yeah.
Really, I am enough. That's lovely.
But why?
Yeah.
You understand?
Mm.
It's that to say always, every day. It's like, why do I feel like something is missing? Why me? Why? Maybe I need this first. Maybe I need that. Maybe I shouldn't have been. To a point where like, maybe if I write it, and I was like, don't put it on the leg, I'll put it here, so even I'm sleeping.
Yes.
But let me tell you, even when it's here, when it hits, you forget the words, or what is I'm enough really supposed to mean to me. So that's what it did to me. And sent me to therapy. There was a point a couple of years back where I actually got there into a therapist. I'm like, I don't even know why these people pay me. I don't even know. Like, I don't do, what am I do nothing. Like, I don't even do that. And it was like, no, but what do you mean? What do you mean? And I was like, no, I feel so bad even showing up.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, but why? Like, it's been this much time. I've tried, but I don't see. Yeah. It was a difficult journey for me. I think it took about almost 3 months for me to eventually feel like, actually,
I got this. I'm fine.
And actually, I've done a lot. But and because I didn't have the courage or the people to say it to, but it was eating me daily. So I was like, Google therapy, I need to say this. But it was so real. It was eating me up. I got that. I got the tattoo after I realized, you are okay as you are. You are good. So that's what it's done to me.
Yes.
Whether I have advice on how to manage that, I don't think I'm that wise yet.
Yes.
How you find it?
No, I'm fine now. But at some point, I got to a point where I told myself, and now how do I even show my face? You know, and for me, it actually reminded me that I needed to tap into my spirituality, right, and to go on a journey of self-discovery, you know, when other things are stripped away and they're no longer there, things that you knew for so long, and you like ask yourself questions like, who am I? And not because you've forgotten your name, but, you know, who is this entity called Pam outside of, you know, this world that I've known for so long, and you know, and what is my relationship with God, and what is my spirituality? And so I found myself going that direction. Right now, I'm like, bring it on, whatever. And you know, it's like
I'm ready for you.
You know what I mean? It's like no one owns anyone, right? And as long as you're living in your truth. And you're not blatantly, discrediting people and things like that, but nothing stops you from telling your story and listening to the stories of other people, which is what prompted me to start this podcast in the first place. It's like, how do I heal, right? How do I find healing? And is this even unique to me? You know, how people, how have they overcome certain challenges? Because we have our joys and our wins and things that excite us, but then we have those things that are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I went through that. I'm still standing, right? So ladies, let's stop.
Listen, I look forward to the day you're the guest. There's so much sharing, I think. People need to be
that day will come. I don't know when.
I'm happy to be the interviewer.
There we go.
That day will come. But thank you so much, ladies, before this turns into a 2-hour episode. So thank you so much for bringing your authentic selves, for bringing your truth, for being open to just really being vulnerable and sharing your stories, your experiences in your professional and personal spaces. And because, you know, once it's out there, right?
Yeah.
But the good thing is that, you know, you're telling your authentic story and you're inspiring young professionals, up and coming entrepreneurs to say, look at Marcy and look at Lindiwe, where they've gone through these things and, you know, they even overcame the imposter syndrome that most of us battle with. Sometimes maybe not so much on the daily, but it comes when it comes, and then you always have to say, I'm enough.
Reset,
You know, you have to remind yourself and what stories are you telling yourself in your head. So to our viewers and our listeners, you have been listening to Marcy and Lindiwe with the topic, The Power of Diverse Talent Pools, episode 21. I hope that you are inspired. I am your host, signing out and checking out, Pamela Klaba for the Diversity Roundtable. Until we talk again on episode 22. I'm trying to remind myself. Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. It was an honor. Thank you.
You're now listening to the Diversity Roundtable. I'm Pamela Klaba, entrepreneur, inclusion enthusiast, and the founder of Nonkosi Creatives with over 2 decades as a corporate HR professional. My goal is to give you insights into conversations with entrepreneurs and corporate professionals who have insightful stories of triumph and leadership. I uncover my personal journey from cultivating diversity and promoting inclusive communities. We'll also find out why building a prosperous society is vital for leadership roles. Subscribe and get ready to rise, lead, and help define the spirit of South African excellence.